I have said many, many times to Brooke, since this was planned, that I grew up in a family where if you wanted attention, don't do what you're supposed to do. You got none for doing what you're supposed to do. So I'm both grateful and embarrassed by your kindness. The dividend for me is the relationships that I've formed with people like you, whom if I had only been an English teacher, someone tonight told me about our relationship when I was her English teacher, and that was pretty different from a relationship in study abroad. So I'm very, very lucky. I'm going to talk to you briefly today about the origins of study abroad at Meredith. There'll be some overlapping. The first study abroad program was launched during the summer of 1974, 50 years ago. A UK program composed of British studies courses that fulfill general education requirements for Meredith students. The creator and director of that first program was, as you well know now, Dr. Roger Crook, whom we are honoring today. It is Dr. Crook who put the study in study abroad. The first summer program, lasting 10 weeks, began with a 2-week intensive study period here on campus, with classes meeting 6 days a week. At the conclusion of this residency, students headed for 8 weeks of additional study and more Saturday classes in London, thus ensuring that Meredith Abroad programs were, from the get-go, defined by their academic rigor. The role of soothing those buckling under the pressure of combining travel with study belonged to Mary Ruth Crook, Roger's wife, and partner in all of the study abroad programs he directed. She was the perfect director's spouse, supporting him in every way, including producing excellent handouts for students. I used the one she created on cathedrals in every London program I ever directed, okay? That first Meredith program was carefully designed to enable our students to take what was, in essence, a semester's work abroad at the same cost as a semester's work on the home campus. Students who elected to graduate a semester early could do so, having enjoyed a summer in England without their degree costing them any more than it would have had they stayed at home. Roger's goal from the start was for study abroad to be an option for all Meredith students. The princely fee for this program was $1,400, including the flights. You all are too young to remember Freddie Laker, whose flight was $99 each way. Now, I'm going to tell you something in a minute about how dependable that was. And an excursion to Paris included in the trip. Those were, indeed, the days. We are delighted to have with us today members of Roger's family. I was going to say, please stand up, but you're standing up. And I would like to know which students are here who studied with Roger. Raise your hands, please. Now that's pretty impressive. In 1975, the second year of the program, Roger kindly invited me to be a faculty member. I was 30. A chance to spend 8 weeks in England was an English teacher's dream come true. I'd never been abroad before, and now I was being given the opportunity to see in Technicolor what I had only before seen in the black and white of my imagination. I had a glorious summer. 2 years later, in 1977, when I was 32, Roger entrusted me to direct a program on my own. I was delighted and terrified in equal measure. Had I known all of what lay in store for me, my terror would have outstripped my delight by a long chalk. Is there anyone here who was in that program? Oh, yeah. Just one? Oh, okay. The rest are too traumatized to come. All right. My mother came to Raleigh and took me shopping in Nowell's. Do you remember Nowell's? Okay. Fearing that I would otherwise go dressed as the hippie I was, and that parents would take one look at me at the airport and decide to take their daughters back home. Okay. When I approached the check-in desk in Kennedy, I was well dressed, but utterly unprepared for the news that our flight to London had been canceled. This was not the beginning I had hoped for. Though we could see the terminal through which we had been rerouted just across the Kennedy Horseshoe, we could not get there. When the airport shuttle stopped, our students picked up their trunk-sized bags and wedged into each other. Briefcase-bearing men maneuvered past and filled up the bus. After a dozen or so repetitions of this scenario, we reluctantly decided to put the students in taxis, though our destination was less than a quarter mile away. Remember that there were no wheels on the luggage in those days, and that Meredith women have never been skilled in packing light. We were relieved when our plane took off only a scant 3 hours later than we had planned. There was no way to notify the coach that was collecting us in London that we would be coming in late, nor, small detail, coming into a different airport. There were not only no wheels, there were no mobile phones, all right? Oh, well. We were on the plane, we were having filet mignon for dinner. Most of you have no clue that airlines used to be known for their excellent cuisine. In case I haven't said it before, those were the days. When I walked through the cabin to check on the students, a man pulled on my sleeve and asked me to bring him a glass of water. My mother had succeeded in making me look professional, just the wrong profession. I brought him his drink and a napkin with the aplomb of a seasoned flight attendant. We arrived in London to bright sunshine, ready to put the aggravation of the previous day behind us, but it was not to be. While we waited in a parking lot for our coach to come from Gatwick to Heathrow, one of our students was hit by a car. We had been in England less than an hour when she and I and Evelyn Simmons and her best friend were in an ambulance, siren blaring, headed for the nearest hospital. Lucky woman, she had no broken bones, required no stitches, though a 50-pence size scar on her back is, I am sure, her most enduring souvenir of her summer abroad experience. Happily, we managed to avoid airports for 8 amazing weeks. We studied hard and perhaps played even harder. The sun shone on us throughout the summer. We took day trips once a week, traveling to delicious places like Broadstairs, Bath, Colchester, St. Albans, Oxford, Cambridge, Windsor, Canterbury, Salisbury. We traveled independently on the weekends. Some of us managed to get to Edinburgh in Scotland and St. David's Head in Wales, as well as to France and Spain and Germany. And every day was an opportunity for new adventure, and we seldom turned that opportunity down. Despite the less than ideal beginning, by the end of the summer, I knew that directing study abroad programs was something I wanted to do as often and for as long as I could. I retired, having directed plus or minus 40 programs, never doubting that this was the work I was meant to do, work I continued to love. Why? I was often asked by curious and at times incredulous friends and colleagues, who could think of nothing worse than taking 20 plus college students out of the country? Why, indeed? I spent a lifetime trying to formulate an answer to that question. This is what I came up with. Many, if not most, of Meredith's study abroad programs have students and faculty living hip to haunch, to borrow a phrase from Browning. In such an environment, the traditional barriers that reinforce the notion that teachers are of one species and students of another, that barrier collapses. Finding themselves in a new culture, both are more willing to try on new modes of being. The podium having banished, often quite literally, a unique learning partnership often emerges, a sort of I'll tell you what I know if you'll tell me what you know, with both parties benefiting. What exactly does one learn abroad that one cannot learn at home? Nothing, but abroad learning happens in ultra high definition. 3D, replete with Dolby DSK wraparound sound. One does not merely learn about the arts, the artifacts, and the cultures. One learns in the midst of them. In doing so, we can be changed forever in large and small ways, carrying forward into the future new knowledge, skills, understandings that we are aware of, even if we can't explain them. What keeps all of us returning to our journals, our photos, our study abroad friends and faculty, our memories, years after the experience itself? I believe it is likely to be our pure delight in that most special time when we dazzled ourselves by seizing every opportunity that presented itself from which we could learn something new. I declared when I returned from that first directing trip that I would endeavor to simulate on this side of the Atlantic the sense of intellectual energy that student and teacher shared abroad. I never succeeded. It is so hard to do at home what is so easy to do abroad. I hope and believe, my failure notwithstanding, that I was a better teacher and mentor and colleague because I tried. In the intervening years, I have reflected so often on how lucky I was that early in my career, I was given the opportunity to teach in a well-conceived, thank you, Dr. Crook, and well-executed study abroad program. It was an opportunity that set the direction and values of my professional life, and a most wonderful professional life it's been. And the effect of my personal life was not, I must say, insignificant. It was thanks to Roger that I met my beloved husband, John Rose, whom Roger hired to teach our students in London. Having spent his career in the House of Commons, John spent his retirement at study abroad at Meredith. I'm sure he preferred the latter. He was my perfect partner, brilliant, widely traveled, a talented linguist, delightful human. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Dr. Crook. Thank you all, and remind me to tell you about the trip home from that first program. It took 48 hours, requiring us to spend the night on the floor of the airport, to abort the initial takeoff when it finally occurred, and to land at 3 different airports in the USA before finally landing not in Raleigh, but in Greensboro. A charter bus met us. I am not kidding. I've got witnesses here. And that's it. Aren't I a lucky woman?